All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. Hopefully you've seen that Jim Carrey movie. So welcome to this webinar. My name's Jimmy Wu. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Function Point. I'm really happy to be joined by a lot of wonderful folks here. It is 10 a.m. right now. I see quite a few people still trying to trickle in the meeting. So let's give it about 1 minute here for everyone to join, and then we'll get started very, very shortly. But yeah, we'll give it 1 minute for everyone here. So if you need to grab a cup of water, this is a great time to do that.
All right. Jimmy, you want to go ahead and get started?
Shall we get started? Yeah. Okay, let's do it. All right, well, welcome everyone. So again, my name's Jimmy Wu. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Function Point. I'm joined here by my partner in crime, Victoria Falk. Victoria is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Function Point. And of course, we have three other individuals that we're very happy to have join us and discuss a little bit more about the industry report. We got Natalie, Heather, and Ethan. But so everyone knows, let's just do a couple housekeeping before we jump in. In your GoToWebinar control panel, there is a questions tab. So you can, if you have any questions throughout the webinar for either the panelist or about Function Point, feel free to type those in there. We'll monitor that as we go through the webinar and ask the panelists whenever we can. And furthermore, this webinar is being recorded. We will be sharing the slide deck as well as the webinar recording to everyone afterwards. But otherwise, let's get started. So talked about a little bit myself and Victoria, but let's talk about the panelists. Heather, Natalie, and Ethan, welcome, welcome. How are you guys doing this morning or afternoon?
Doing great.
Very good. Yeah.
Awesome. So perhaps let's get the audience to know you guys a little bit more. Maybe we'll start with Heather. Maybe if you can take a minute to maybe introduce yourself and about your business a little bit more.
No problem. Thanks, Jimmy. My name is Heather, and I'm the founder of an accounting firm called Finally. Our business is to provide accounting solutions to creative services businesses, and we do that in two ways, either by providing a remote accounting team or by providing fractional CFO services. My background prior to starting this business was in public agencies, private agencies, and private equity-owned media company.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Heather. Natalie, why don't we go with you next?
Hello, everybody. So I'm Natalie Serkins. I'm the founder of Collective IQ, which is a more modern model of an agency we've been running for almost 6 years that works on a collaborative model with using only consultants instead of full-time staff. And my background is in running marketing operations on client side, as well as restructuring and putting in process and systems in agencies and systems like Function Point over the last 20 years. And in between that, I'm usually overseeing all creative direction, art direction within any of the creative groups.
Okay, perfect. Ethan, last but not least.
I love the backgrounds. Yeah, this is probably my 25th year in the industry. I actually am the president and COO of Crux, which is an agency in Kansas City. I should say an unagency, because we try to do things like Natalie a little differently than the typical model. And I would describe it as marketing department as a service led by a fractional CMO for our clients. And most of our clients are small to medium-sized businesses. that are looking to accelerate growth, or they've hit the top of a growth curve and they need to kind of change what they're doing to get back into growth mode. I was founder of an agency that I ran for about 20 years prior to this, so I have a lot of experience in tools like Function Point, and was excited to find Function Point and kind of dive in and put that behind the systems that we're building within Crux.
All right, perfect, awesome. Well, welcome, folks, and we look forward to hearing all the insights that you have to provide about the findings of the industry report. Before we dive into the report, just so everyone knows a little bit about Function Point, if this is the first time you've heard about us, Function Point, we are a software company. We provide an all-in-one agency management software designed for a creative industry between around 5 to 200 employees. I like to say, Function Point gives agencies a single source of truth for all your projects, whether it's your estimates or CRM, your project deadlines, your staff resources and workload, or your profitability around your staff and your projects, and all in one place. The model that we really, or our mission is really to help you take care of the business side of your agency workflow so you can really focus on what you do best, which is being creative. So we are actually celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. That's coming up, and we've been, we're very proud. We've been successful for over 25 years because our goal is to give an ROI to our customer, and over 90% of our customers do see an ROI. In fact, one of the key ROIs we're very proud of is that Function Point customers, a recent survey we found, is 2.5 times more likely to not over-service clients compared to others as well. So, but yeah, that's our elevator pitch a little bit about Function Point. If you want to learn a little bit more, feel free to visit our website at functionpoint.com. But without further ado, Victoria, can you tell us a little bit more what's in this report?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So guys, we do an industry survey every single year, and we want to focus on a couple key areas of the industry and in business. So in this report in particular, we're capturing trends in services, specialties, workspaces, and staff. We're focusing heavily in productivity and profitability. And then you'll also learn a little bit about how tech stack has influenced or affected our agencies across the United States and Canada primarily, how tech stack is impacting their business on a daily, yearly, and hopefully multi-year basis.
So who actually answered these?
Yeah, so we had 323 respondents over the course of, it was about 200 different agencies. Their roles ranged from owners to finance to project management and creative, and basically everything in between. We had media production businesses answering, full service agencies, boutique design agencies, all different types of agencies. And we have a good range of who has been in business for how long, are they reaching their 10-year mark or greater. So we've got a good demographic of that, and then as well the number of employees that they currently have on their team. So that's our demographic list, and you can obviously go into the agency report after this webinar and see a little bit more detail how that shaped up. But yeah, those are our demographics.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Victoria. So for the panelists, we'll be going through about 5 different major statistics and get your feedback and analysis from that. But for the audience, there are definitely much more details and statistics on the report, so feel free to download it to see them. But the first one, in 2020, we did a report specifically around COVID. And one of the key stats we found was that 53% the agencies had to cut staff. No surprises there. However, in 2021, there seems to be a little bounce back where on agencies, on average, grew their headcount by 25%. I guess I'm curious, maybe Ethan, we'll start from you. I mean, what was the experience you had at your agency, and did you feel the same trend as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually doubled our headcount in 2021, and it was probably in response to a couple different factors. I think there was pent-up demand in the market. We saw a lot of client budgets pull back in the previous year, and then in 2021, the budgets were refunded. And not only did our existing clients grow, but then our new business just took off. And we probably added almost 70% to our revenue top line just based on new clients coming in for the most part. So it was really, largely, I would say, COVID driven. At the same time, we had done a lot of things and took advantage of that period to put systems and build a team to accommodate for the growth on the other side of that. Not to say we're entirely on the other side of it yet, but we're definitely feeling like marketers decided they couldn't wait any longer.
Okay. Natalie, did you guys feel the same at your agency or other agencies that you've been talking to or working with?
Yeah, definitely. I found that when COVID hit initially, everyone pulled back and we all sort of froze and not sure, and our clients and marketers weren't sure what to do with their budgets and where to spend and where it was safe. And I'd say that was for a very short period of time. I'd say halfway through 2020, things started to change quite a bit and pick up. And I'd say 2021, things went gangbusters once we all figured out with our clients that we still need to be marketing. People are still spending and pour us to lots of information. We can hit them digitally more than we did in other traditional matters before, in other channels. But fundamentally, everybody is accepted that we have a new way of living, and we're working around that and finding more targeted ways to reach our clientele.
So during this bounce back in 2021, did you guys feel like there were specific services or directions that people are or from the market that they're demanding more of versus over others compared to pre-COVID times?
I'm happy to take that. I would say, while digital was already kind of strongly entrenched in a lot of marketing plans, I think people doubled down in that area in particular. I think they recognize consumers and even B2B customers, their behavior changed. They're working more from home. They're on their laptops. And so I saw more investment in digital, absolutely, on the other side of this.
Okay, perfect. All right. Now, with Omicron, this is something that's starting to pick up over the past couple weeks and, in January with Omicron. Do you see 2020 happening again? Or how would you recommend agencies that with the second time go around handle a situation like that again? Or how are your agency preparing for that?
I would jump in and say I don't think it's any different. I don't feel like it's any different than it was 6 months ago. I think fundamentally, when we're speaking in Canada, but for the most part, everybody's continuing as we were 6 months ago, because the pandemic hasn't left. It's just evolving and changing with different variants, and fundamentally, everybody's still at home. I think when things change and everything opens up properly everywhere and everybody is out and about, then I think some of those things will change. But in terms of doubling down, I think everybody in our marketers at our clients have all done that. And at this point, where services on the agency side fundamentally are more focused on flexibility and being able to make sure that their agency partners are running well virtually to be able to service their needs appropriately.
Perfect. That's reassuring. All right,
Jimmy, I would add one thing on that front.
Yeah, go for it.
I would say in 2020 and 2021, certainly in Canada, there were a lot of subsidies available that where the government shared in the investment on new resources, especially in 2021, and those programs have largely come to an end in Canada. So I would say that in 2021, most agencies sort of had the confidence to bring employees on a full-time basis back onto their teams, and it will be interesting to see if the same thing happens in 2022 when the subsidies aren't available to the same extent that they were in 2021, 2020.
That's a really good point.
That is a good point. And that ties actually really well to our next stat, which is utilizing freelancers. So over the past year in 2021, the survey showed that over 70% of the agencies utilize freelancers to deliver their work. In fact, on average, across the board, 22% of the agency's workload were delivered by freelancers. So Heather, maybe let's start with you first. Being on the finance side of things, from your opinion, what's your advice to agencies from a financial perspective, balancing between, say, a full-time employee versus a freelancer?
I would say that, definitely last year we saw the investment in freelance resources was much higher than what we normally see. Across the board, we always see an investment in freelance. And I think that in many cases, agencies last year were price takers of, the investment on freelance instead of having any sort of bargaining power in the negotiation. And the better job that agencies can do at forecasting their future work, the better job they will be able to plan the freelance capacity that they need, and be in a better position to negotiate more favorable prices with freelancers.
So it sounds like the key is to forecast, making sure you understand your future workloads coming in. Natalie, I know that for your agency, you guys are, one of the rare agencies, the rare 3%. So only 3% of the agencies out there are run fully by freelancers. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts and how maybe help the audience understand a little bit more of why you go that direction. What are some key areas that you watch for when you utilize freelancers?
So on our end, for everyone to know, we run Collective IQ on a select inclusive roster at 350 senior level talent consultants. We call them collaborators. And so we scale up and down as needed, but more importantly, we build bespoke teams for our clients. So it becomes almost a custom agency. So in terms of utilization for freelance, I'd say, as I'm sure everyone's heard about, the great resignation and the talent shortage that a lot of areas are having, in the sense that a lot of people don't want to go back full time. They don't want to be dragged back to an office at some point. They want to stay freelance. We've been virtual for almost 6 years. So we started out virtually because we want to tap into some of the amazing talent that we can get with our consultants, as opposed to people that we want to drag into a bricks and mortar every day. I'd say the biggest trend I'm seeing with all of that right now is just that all the freelancers are fully engaged and very busy, and it's trying to make sure you're planning work and getting them booked in time, as opposed to thinking you're just going to go to freelance when you need overflow from your current full-time staff. So I'd say definitely plan and book and get your freelancers booked as soon as you can. To Heather's point about trying to negotiate with freelancers, I still feel like at this point they have the upper hand. They're in demand, and no, there's not too many people who are, at least on our level of talent, that are sitting around waiting for work and not busy. So they can pick and choose, but I think there's still a bit of a level set that's happening, because all different agencies were paying all different rates and there was no standardization. We've sort of standardized for our people, but I think it was a Wild West for a little while, and a lot of people went freelance all of a sudden. My best advice from other than forecasting for booking as well as cost, is to really be a little bit more scrupulous in terms of working with freelance and making sure that you have the right contracts in place and the right SLAs that support your agreements that you have with your clients, so that your freelancers are supporting what you're doing in-house, as opposed to going off and doing everything their own way. So you need them integrated into your process and systems.
Okay, awesome, perfect.
Ethan, how are you guys, you said that your agency grew double. How are you guys integrating freelancers, if at all, into your workflow, kind of under the same things that Natalie and Heather talked about?
Yeah, it definitely factors more into the way we work today, but it is still a small part of kind of our operating model in terms of leveraging freelance. And I would say, on the flip side of what Natalie is experiencing, we're capitalizing on the other side, where folks have tried to freelance and they realize it's not for them. They want to get back in an office. They want to work on it with a team. So I think it just depends on the personality of the individual. I think you have some folks that are being very successful at it and it fits their lifestyle, and other folks that realize that they appreciate the collaboration that happens in an office. So we're seeing both. I would say the candidates that we're interviewing today, it's almost a 50-50 split for folks who are looking to be in office and folks who are looking for hybrid environments.
kind of leads us to one of our questions from our audience, is just any tips or tricks in supporting remote workers as business operators and leaders. A lot of businesses have switched to hybrid or fully remote models. So do you guys have any tips or recommendations for that? And that could go to anybody.
My best tip and trick would be to make sure you have a channel strategy of how you communicate with your freelancers or your full-time staff when they're remote, is to really be sure on what is the consistent way that everyone is gathering information, sharing and communicating, collaborating together, and it's not everyone doing it their own way. Otherwise it doesn't work, and it gets confusing and things get lost. Like, for instance, if you're using a Teams chat or a Slack, like, be very clear on what do you share in Slack versus what do you use in Function Point, what do you use in email, and make sure that everyone's following the same rules. Otherwise it becomes very cumbersome and too much time probably spent on a computer that didn't need to be trying to sort through the communication.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think getting everybody on the same platforms is critical. Also getting everybody on the same schedule. So what we've determined is that, you know, if you have 30 different people working 30 different ways, you know, from home or in the office and whenever they want, sometimes the collaboration that you want and the culture you want to develop isn't there. And so we made a conscious decision to give everybody that work from home time, but do it on every Wednesday. So we have work from home Wednesdays. And that way we find, you know, everybody's either in the office or they're out of the office, and it's a level playing field for communication.
On that note, one thing that we're seeing a lot with our clients as they're trying to bring people back to office is giving them a flexible that 3 days a week they need to be in office and 2 days they don't need to be. And the challenge with that is that if you don't do what Ethan just suggested, then you've got people that are sometimes working at home and other people that are coming on site, and people are not going to be super motivated to come into the office every day, sit on earphones and be on Zoom calls all day long when they could have just done that from home. So it's trying to get your team actually in at the same time.
Okay. Well, let's jump to the next step. Let's talk about challenges in around productivity. Victoria, do you want to lead this one for us?
Yeah, I think that, you know, in 2020, almost every agency probably saw a significant dip in productivity and project management workflows with the switch to a hybrid or remote work style. So now that we're a year out of that, and we're going into 2022, we're still seeing some pretty major productivity challenges, 51% being miscommunication, as well as project management barriers for not scoping our projects correctly. Are there anything that you guys do, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, but are there any agency kind of experiences that you guys have had that have directly influenced these two ideas of miscommunication and project not being scoped properly?
I can go. And in terms of the work that we do with our clients, our goal is really to make the financial impact of these things more visible to leadership teams so that they can actually do something with the information. And so if we just talk about projects not being scoped properly, one of the things that we always produce as part of our finance solution with our clients is to make sure at the end of every month, the owners know exactly how much revenue each client generated for the business and how much time was invested to generate that revenue. And we do that on both a monthly basis and on a year-to-date basis. And we encourage the owners of the business to really focus on the year-to-date information, because we recognize that, you know, revenue recognition policies or timing differences might show up in the monthly data, but they should work themselves out in the year-to-date data. And when the leadership team has access to sort of management quality summarized information, then it's much easier for them to identify where there are opportunities, I guess, to find improvement, especially as it relates to not scoping projects properly or over-servicing clients.
The one thing I could say that I've always implemented from a process perspective, and why I think Function Point is so key for this, is having your project managers monitor, and every individual is putting their timesheets, but fundamentally the project managers looking at the health of the project in the dashboards and in the job financials, and tracking and making sure that everybody is delivering within the range that have been planned. And if they can't, then trying to figure out throughout the project how to get it back on track. And more importantly, at the end of the project, taking a look at what was the productivity, where was the profitability, where did you overspend, and looking at that as a history to inform future process, or more importantly, future estimates.
Have you guys noticed a need for new responsibilities or new roles to combat these two issues of productivity and project management barriers?
Yeah, and I'll jump on that one. We actually implemented a traffic management role for the first time. We're 5 years old and hadn't operated that way. But going from 14 to 30 people in 1 year kind of required it. And going from probably 20 to 40 plus clients required that as well. And it's not easy, to implement. And I would say probably the biggest challenge in all this is that it's not necessarily intuitive for a lot of small firms to put those processes in place. But it's absolutely essential, because not only do you have the visibility through the tool like Function Point and access to that data, you need somebody who's looking at it, interpreting it, assisting the teams, bringing them along into that journey, because it's not, I would say for a lot of small agencies, it's just not a natural thing for them.
That's fantastic. And so do you have any sort of recommendations? Because I think with things like a traffic manager, creative resource managers, I'm seeing those pop up a lot too. How do agencies justify the cost of someone in that position when that's generally not going to be a billable position?
We've actually made it billable.
Oh, yeah.
In the case where it's not billable, I think you have to believe that the opportunity is higher than the cost. And so, what is the cost to the business of not having that position? And often it's a lot of, billable time that doesn't actually get billed. And I mean, it's not like a finance position, right? A lot of people see that as a cost, but it really truly could be an enabler of performance when done correctly. And so I don't know, Ethan, in your business, what sort of KPIs do you give to the traffic manager, and how do you know whether it's successful?
Yeah, well, just to first go back to what I was saying. So we tag just a small amount of time on every single client monthly retainer to account for that, because for me, it's kind of like investing in a tech services fee or a tech stack fee. It's part of the operation that you're buying when you hire us, and it goes back to our marketing department as a service model. But for us, utilization is absolutely important. Resource management, going back to that original conversation, ensuring that clients' deadlines are being hit. Optimizing the workflow so we're getting more work through for them in the time that they're buying with us is really how we justify it in terms of just workflow and productivity.
That's fantastic. Oh, go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about over-servicing a little bit, because there's a couple of questions around that. And over-servicing, as we all know, is very costly and demoralizing to the team. But curious, do you guys have ways to, and surprisingly, almost a third actually don't do anything about it, even though they over-service regularly. What would you say to that, or maybe thoughts on how do you guys flag for potential over-servicing or overages before even starting to work on a project? Or how does your agency overcome some of these over-servicing barriers yourself to try to minimize that? Because we're all going to over-service one way or another at a time. But yeah, but how do you minimize it?
I would just say, in the upfront scoping is really important, and having experienced eyes on that initial estimate or project fee is critical, and then just managing it in real time. And that's one of the ways we use Function Point is, we do weekly reporting for each of our pods or our client teams, so they can see what clients are in jeopardy of being over-serviced. If there are certain hours that we're over or under, we manage to that, and those teams have that at the beginning of the week, and they can manage the rest of their week based on that reporting.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to scoping the project properly at the upfront.
So one of our panelists or one of our attendees has asked how are you defining over servicing to your team? So are you using that phrase? Are you using something else to define the concept of over servicing and preventing burnout, frustrations, you know, your employees getting frustrated with your clients? How are you guys defining that?
I can't answer it because I don't think it's a concern for us. So.
Yeah.
The one thing that I'll say from our point of view, oh, go ahead, Ethan.
Oh, Heather, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay, so from our point of view, it's very easy to dismiss the problem as over servicing, but there also could be a pricing issue at play. So I just before the sort of lack of profitability on a project is dismissed as over servicing, I do think you need to do the diligence to make sure it was priced properly in the first place. And for those agencies that choose to not do anything about it, that is actually a choice that people can make. I just wonder if they've consciously made that choice with data or not. So, I mean, there are clients that you want in your portfolio of clients. And, you know, very often people work with those clients in a way that's not as profitable as it could be. I just would want to make sure that that was an actual choice that someone had made.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and I 100% agree with what Heather said. You know, a lot of times it goes back to that visibility and being accountable and watching those numbers. When it happens, based on the original scoping and because we're retainer based, nothing should be a surprise. But if you're not watching it, then it can sneak up on you. And what we found is there are very simple things that you can put in place to avoid it, where a lot of times the overservicing or the extra hours happen when you've got too many people in a meeting. And so it's like, how do we get really smart about meeting size? And is there some hygiene around that? Or it's you know, clear direction at the beginning of a project. Are we briefing in the team correctly? Because that's going to save us a lot of time on the back end if we do that properly. And if we don't, then chances are we're going to burn extra hours trying to solve problems that we caused.
When you are choosing to set boundaries and to not overservice your clients, how are you setting those boundaries with clients? Like, what is your process in actually having those conversations and creating a space where your employees feel valued, but your clients also feel valued, even though you may not be giving them everything that they want?
I think that you just defined the magic of account service.
Yeah. Are you,
Okay.
so do you guys have is it responsible, are your account services teams responsible for managing those overages and paying attention to and navigating these
I mean, our goal is to put the account teams in charge of their own P&Ls. And of course they get guidance from the operations team, but at the same time, it's their responsibility, it's their client.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we go into our next one, Natalie, there was one question specifically for you on who has financial accountability against a job or client profitability if everyone on your team is freelance?
Well, from a profitability standpoint, because we lock everybody and we don't do hours, we work on fees. The overall accountability is to the project manager, and that project manager needs to stick to the scope of work and what they're managing the team with. So we're all sticking to the scope of work we have with the client and with our contracts with our POs, with our freelancers. So everybody has a commitment to be able to make sure they stay within their fees. Otherwise, there is no other fees coming in to pay them. So I have to say everyone on the team has their own financial responsibility to, but fundamentally our project managers are responsible for the overall health of the project and making sure that they're managing the client in such a way that is allowing us to stay within scope.
Oh, thank you. All right, the dreaded time tracking question. I think for a lot of us who have worked in agencies before, this is a hill that many will die on as far as not wanting to track time. However, Heather, from a financial standpoint, how do you navigate this one way or the other, whether it's positive or negative, in getting accurate time tracking for your teams?
So for the agencies that we work with, we've got, I would say 80% of them track time and 20% don't. It's not 100% accurate. I think everyone knows that, but it still needs to be good enough quality information that you can make decisions with it. You know, in terms of how our agencies sort of ensure compliance, it does really start at the top, although most owners don't really do their timesheets, just sort of, you know, everyone's aware of that. You know, we don't really see that disciplinary action is effective. We sort of a rewards-based system is what is more effective. But ultimately, I think most, I mean, we try to work with clients who are quite serious about their financial performance, and those type of businesses tend to attract people who, you know, care about that sort of thing and want to be working on the winning team or a profitable team. And I think that they understand that ultimately the better quality information they're getting from their time tracking data, the more profitable the agency can be. And the more profitable the agency, the more likely they're going to be staffed appropriately, the more likely they'll have money to reinvest into the business. So it's a good thing. And for those businesses who don't do time tracking, you know, that's not a barrier for us to work with those businesses, but they definitely need to have a mechanism in place to understand the economics of the client agreements. And so for those agencies, we try to estimate. So, you know, the business lead or the PM tries to estimate how people are spending their time, and we create, you know, we use that information to come up with what the revenue should be based on that resource model, and we compare that back to what the actual revenue is, and where there's large gaps between how the business is resourced and the revenue that it's generating, then we have to figure out what we're going to do with that information. Usually it's a pricing issue.
That's really good insight. Thank you so much, Heather. Ethan, what about your team? How are you guys encouraging time tracking?
You know, we actually go on the carrot side of the carrot and stick argument, and we have a timesheet lottery. We basically have a point in time at the end of every week. So Friday end of day, everybody's time for the week has to be in. So we have good intelligence going into Monday and knowing what our hours look like on our clients. And if you get your time in every week on time for a month, then you go into a timesheet lottery and we bonus people out with gift cards and other things and reward them for doing it. And it sounds silly, but it actually works well. And it, you know, if anything, it's just an easy way to communicate it and get the point across. And we also emphasize with everybody, you know, if we're not running efficiently, if we're not putting our time in, we don't know when we need to hire somebody. So if you tell me you're really busy and you're overworked, I don't have any data to prove that. I only have your word. And if I have the data, then it's a lot easier for me to make that decision and help you take some of that work off you by hiring when we need to. And that's a big part of it. I mean, it really comes down to, while our clients rarely ever look at our hours, you know, they're really typically just, we're billing what we say we're going to bill to them. So it's almost like a project fee at the end of the day. It really, internally, I don't know how we would operate without doing it. I tried to do the value-based pricing in the past and tried to do away with hour tracking long time ago. And I don't think you can do it. I just don't think there's a great way to do it unless you're a fine artist and you can charge whatever you want for a piece of artwork. So.
That's fantastic. Thank you. What about the idea that the accuracy of time tracking? So not just like, are we doing it or not doing it, but how are you guys managing accuracy versus inaccuracy, and is that affecting your decision to do time tracking for your team? And Heather, you might see this across a couple of your clients in the argument of yes or no, should we do it or not?
It's actually really difficult for us to know whether it's accurate or inaccurate because we don't work inside of businesses, but it's not difficult for us to identify where there's more or like substantially more time or substantially less time than what was planned. So if we can do a good job at least highlighting to the business lead or the project manager, whoever's responsible to the budget, then I think they're better suited to know whether it's reasonable, unreasonable. But if you can get good compliance on a weekly basis, I think it's good enough. Like, I don't see too many people who are billing by the hour these days anyhow. So it just has to be a good proxy for what the estimate should have been. I don't think anyone's looking for perfection here. We're
My
not
2
working
cents,
with agencies that are looking for perfection.
if I could jump in, I'd say the person who's doing your estimating should be the one that's looking at the productivity as well as the, whether it be department manager or project manager. When I've overseen large creative departments and studios, because I'm also advising on the estimating, I can know whether someone that spent 5 hours doing something that should have taken 2, there's a problem there, and what is the problem? Were they not briefed properly? And it's taking those, were not briefed properly, did they not actually spend that amount of time doing that? Like, and then it's part of, comes down to managing your resources. So if someone's taking 5 hours to do something that should take most of the people in your team 2 hours, you need to go from a management perspective. How can you help that person get back down to the 2 hours, or is the 2 hours correct or not? And I think it comes down to people management at that point, not just tracking the time, but what do you take with that data and how do you help it fix the way you run your business?
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. That was very insightful. Jimmy?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about profitability next. So there's the concept of billable and billability, and we'll just quickly define this as the difference. So billable percentage is talking about where if you have 75% billable, you've worked about 120 hours of billable work out of 160 total work hours for a full-time staff. Whereas billability is how much of those billable hours were actually invoiced or billed to the client. So 65, for example, if you have 75% billable, perhaps only out of those 120 billable hours, only 104 of the hours were billed to the client out of this. So therefore your billability is 65%. Now from the report surveys, what we found is that on average, agencies had about 68% billable and 67% billability. I guess maybe Heather, we'll start with you since you're on the finance side of things. What do you see as your clients? Billable versus billability? Why is it important to differentiate the two? And what do you usually recommend your clients to aim for?
So first of all, I'm kind of surprised by the small difference between billable and billability. I would have expected to see a much bigger gap there. And so just in my experience when I was a full-time employee and in our business, the billable number tends to be much higher than that, and the billability in often case across the board would be lower than that. So, from a utilization point of view, we do, most of the businesses that we work with, the target is different depending on the role in the business. So there are some roles that are more production focused, I guess, where they are producing all the time, where the expectation around billability or utilization, I guess is the word that I will use, is much higher. In the more senior position, the utilization expectation tends to decline. But we do see lots of agencies who focus a lot on utilization, but don't connect the dot on, well, how much of that time is actually getting billed. So it doesn't really matter that someone's 90% utilized if they're only ever recovering 60% of it. So I guess our advice would be to make sure if you guys are tracking the utilization of your employees, that you have a mechanism to track how much of that is billable. And so usually that comes through your financial reporting.
Awesome. Ethan, I guess for your agencies, how does this, Heather alluded to being a little surprised, and I see your head nodding about the two numbers being very close to each other. What do you aim for your agency, and why do you think the difference is so low from the survey?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't explain the difference on the survey, but I would agree with everything Heather said. So our target is typically probably 80% utilization is a very realistic goal for us. And I use the term utilization realization. So, and utilization would be your billable time. Realization is your billability, you know, so that's what actually gets billed. And our realization is probably going to be closer to that 60% range. So we see a wider gap, as Heather noted. You know, I would say the other number we look at that's really important in terms of efficiency for us is effective hourly rate, because we know all the kind of hours that we have available that are billable, and you know, for our entire team, and we know what we're billing. And so if we can also monitor what is that effective hourly rate across the entire business, that gives us another idea of how efficient we are.
Perfect. Natalie, I guess I'm curious, hiring a lot of contractors, I guess, does your team track time? Do you have your contractors track time? And how do you measure the billable and billability of your team?
So our contractors do not, as mentioned before, we're fee-based, which I find is more efficient for us than talking hours, and makes the team more accountable, and it's a better way for us to take advantage, especially of senior people, where they can take advantage of the billing properly, in the sense that this is what the value is for what they're doing versus how long it takes to do them. As they're senior people, they might be able to get some things done more efficiently on certain tasks versus others. And then our core accountant, project managers, and admin staff are doing timesheets, and that's overall, I'm going to say our billability is very high. The kind of things that we're not actually that are not billable are fundamentally more things that we're doing that are new business focused, where we're investing into to get the new business. But for the most part, I think it comes down to, on our end, for really strong capabilities in estimating I think the experience of estimating, and we know how long something should take to do, and I make sure we've got the right talent to be able to execute within the scope fundamentally. So I'd say our billable amounts are pretty close to exactly what our targets are. So I'm not seeing a big shift. When I was on the agency side and we weren't working in this model, I'd say our utilization rates and billable were much higher than these percentages.
It's very interesting.
Maybe it's just the way I manage, maybe, I don't know.
It's very interesting to hear, because you got, you know, two individuals, Ethan, Natalie, and Heather. You work with so many agencies, you know, 3 different perspectives, and all of you have been in the industry for, like, you know, over 20+ years. So it's very interesting to see kind of the different approaches and results that you guys see and for your business agencies. So now, one curious thing that we found, and I'm going to pump the function point tire a little bit here, is we found agencies that actually utilize function point on average had 4% higher billable and billability compared to non-function point users. So I know, Ethan, you mentioned a couple times you've used function point to see kind of your business. How does maybe a tool like function point help you make business decisions, or why do you think this attributes to? Because 4% is quite a bit. 4% is about 80 hours of billable time for a staff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's at least in the position that I sit in, it's very helpful just to have the dashboard. So, you know, at a glance, I can check the utilization of the agency, see how we're tracking. It's also great when we understand we have difficult clients, like we were talking about before, where we might be at jeopardy of actually over servicing. We can pay closer attention to those hours. So yeah, I mean, it's just the access to the data is just a lot easier for us.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're running towards the end. So we are at the last question here to talk about technology stack. So the top 3 software tools that agencies ranked as improving productivity was project management tool, a time tracking tool, and a resource management tool. These were the top 3 in order. And not surprisingly, you know, the majority of the agencies do use a project management and a time tracking tool. However, even though resource management was ranked top 3, less than 1/3 of the agencies, only about 1/4 of the agencies actually use a resource management tool. So I guess for you, have you guys seen, do you use a resource management tool at your agency? And if yes or no, why? And you know, what type of benefits? What's your recommendations to other agencies when around this area?
Jimmy, it might be helpful Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ethan.
I was just gonna say, it might be helpful to define what you consider a resource management tool.
Yeah, so resource management tool in the context of the survey was around being able to see staff workload, okay, managing of the staff workload.
Perfect.
I can comment on this one because we work with a lot of agencies, and so I would say that this feels pretty accurate to me, and that I would say that most agencies haven't invested in sort of that resource management position that Ethan described. And so unless there's someone in the business who's dedicated to that task, it's unlikely to ever get done, no matter what platforms are available to the business. And so for businesses that sell time, where the optimization of their resources is so important to their overall profitability and probably to the quality of the product they produce, it would be good to see more people investing in, even if it's not a resource manager, a true project management discipline. A lot of the agencies that we work with, just that project management kind of sits in the account team. And often it's not really what they're best at, right? So, I mean, I feel like Ethan and Natalie probably do have resource management in their business.
Yeah, I would echo, what Heather was saying. It's hard to do. I think that's why a lot of agencies don't do it, and they don't do it well. And it's you're making a conscious decision to invest time in something that may not immediately result in additional time for you. But it is at the end of the day, it is one of those investments that will pay dividends. It just takes a while to pay off and to figure it out and do it right.
If I could add, all the consulting I've done to restructure agencies, every CEO or owner of the company, that was always their biggest wish list. Like they wanted the proverbial whiteboard to see what everybody that had billable time was doing and to plan who's not being used properly and how to properly plan the resources. And I'd say I'm not surprised that the number's so low because I think it's the weakest link for most people. A lot of process and time tracking and things are put in place to try and get to that metric and to be able to use that information. And the question is what are people using the information? So in a function point, that's one of the biggest benefits is you can see where everybody is and what their utilization is and who has room and whatnot, and whether you need to get a freelancer or hire another person or whatnot. But I think a lot of people don't, unless there's like Heather said, unless there's a role dedicated for someone who's actually making sure that everybody is being utilized properly and assigned to the right projects and the right workloads. And it's not just sitting. One thing, for instance, when we used to run studios, we'd be very clear that everything came in through one funnel to that studio, and the studio manager or traffic manager would be the one who assigned a project. So it wasn't just everybody going to their favorite designer or their favorite copywriter or favorite production person. And I think that it's something that most agencies are weak on because they don't dedicate the resource to manage the resources.
One thing I would just add quickly to that too is it's not always about efficiency either. So when I'm watching utilization, I'm also looking for burnout. I'm looking for folks that are at 100% plus utilization and looking for problems that we can solve to offload folks who may be overworked because that's not a sustainable model either. And unless you're watching that top end, just like you are the bottom end to drive efficiency, then you're headed for trouble because you could lose an entire resource that totally screws up your model.
Okay. Perfect. Well, that was we got about 7 minutes left here, but thank you all for those for some great insights. I do want to I think we have time for maybe one question from the audience, and then we'll wrap this up. So one of the questions was the number being so close together on the billable versus billability, or utilization versus realization, as you said, Ethan. Could there be this close together because there's not the audience, the survey respondents did not understand the difference between the two? Do you guys experience that with your staff? And I guess how do you help your staff understand the difference of the two and the importance of the two? Is that something you guys proactively do?
So I'll just jump on that. So I think for 90% of the staff, utilization is the most important thing for them to worry about. The realization is the profitability, and that's usually managed by senior lead team level folks. And the last thing I want an employee on the front lines doing design or copy or something like that worrying about is whether they're profitable. Their job is just to make sure they're tracking their time. If they're not responsible for their own resource management, and we have a resource manager in place, that's not a conversation I want to confuse them with. I think just as long as they know that they're tracking their hours and they're getting their utilization rate where it needs to be, everything on the back end of that from a profitability or realization perspective, that's on other folks, managers and up in the business to keep an eye on.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's get a closing remark from everyone then. I guess we'll go in opposite order this time. Natalie, why don't we start with you first? Maybe a closing remark for the agencies in 2022.
My best closing remark advice would be is to make sure that you have a system that helps you manage your teams, but also has clear communication laid out for everybody, so that it allows everybody to do their job well and to enjoy doing it and to be able to work well together, and not keep everything in two separate departments where people aren't collaborating. Fundamentally, I think a system like Function Point makes some of the admin part and things a lot easier for that. But overall, my best advice is to, especially when everybody's been working remote, is to find better ways to collaborate.
Perfect. Ethan, what about for yourself?
For me, it comes down to that idea of you can't manage what you can't measure, and ideally, you can measure time, you can manage time, there's something you can do about it. And yeah, I think a lot of folks have had bad experiences with tools in the past. Maybe they're too expensive, they're too complicated. Finding that sweet spot, and I think that's how we arrived at Function Point, being able to get what we need out of the tool fairly easily and implement it. That's everything, and it allows us to control an important part of our business that, if we weren't, I don't know if I'd have confidence in any of our numbers, into our financials.
Okay. Heather, let's wrap it up for us.
I'm sort of in Ethan's camp, and I would say that winners keep score. And so for any of the businesses where profitability is an issue, I would strongly encourage you to choose 3 or 4 KPIs for 2022 that the business is going to commit to and that will have a big impact on your financial performance. And then to really establish a cadence around measuring those KPIs and making sure that you're moving the needle. And so it might be unrealistic if you're a business that's delivering 10% profit to grow to 25% profit this year, but it's not unrealistic to move from 10 to 15% with a little bit of discipline around sort of monitoring your performance.
Perfect. Well, folks, that's the advice from 3 individuals that's been in the industry for over 20 plus years. So I really hope you enjoyed the webinar. Thank you all for joining, and thank you, Natalie, Heather, and Ethan, for taking the time today and participating. Now, if you do have any questions, again, Heather at Finale is provides financial services and CFO consulting services for many agencies. If you are interested, feel free to contact her. We will be sharing this slide deck and recording to everyone so that you have that information with you. And if you'd like to learn a little bit about Function Point, feel free to reach out to us or visit our website at functionpoint.com. The report is available for download as of yesterday or Monday this week. So please feel free to go to our website and download the report. But thank you all so much for joining. I appreciate your time, and I hope you all have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.